So my name's SilverSmith. I'm a Native American author, and I have a book coming out, Finding My Sacred, and it comes out on November 1st. And the book starts out with me being inside a chapel, and I'm doing a confession to Father. But I did have an abortion when I just met my future husband, and that plagued me. That could have been a lot of the reason why I had so much anxiety. And I was pretty much a good Catholic. I went to catechism and I went to church a lot, and it wasn't something that I did. Wasn't something I just decided to do overnight. It was something that I prayed upon and thought about, and the end thing is I didn't want to be a single mom raising my son all by myself. I didn't have faith in myself that I could take care of a baby financially and just emotionally at that time. So I went in to confess, and the father at that time, supposed father, you'll find out who he actually was if you read the book. He slammed the Bible down in the confession booth and said, "You committed a mortal grave sin." And I ended up running out of the chapel thinking he was going to chase me, and I'm already riddled with anxiety. So I get into my car and I drive home, and then he sends me a text message. I don't know how you do that, but it was over and over again, about like 100 times, and it said, "You're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell." And that was just such it hurt my soul, because I was looking for him to help me heal and to confess and to do my prayers and just start anew, and that wasn't what happened. So that's the beginning of the book, so that was one of my issues. And I believe another thing was I was adopted, but my parents are loving and just wonderful, and it's a blessing that they were able to have me in their life, and I was able to have them in my life. My biological parents were Navajo, mm-hmm. and my adopted parents were both Navajo, so it worked out. My dad was trusting. He was the loving one. He'd watch cartoons with me. He'd throw the football with me. He would do anything with me. He taught me how to ride a bike. I got unconditional love from him. My mom, on the other hand, was very strict and proper, and she wasn't afraid of anything. Just that, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it done. And she did. And it was like, she expected that of me. And I was more like my dad, kind of like, we're funny, we're fun to be around, we're loving, we just want to hang out and watch the football game, where mom is like, we got to do this, we got to do that. She had her lists to do, and it was like being in the army. So from her, I learned early on, I was fearful of her, and I felt like, God, if I could, I'd call her Mrs. Smith. But whereas Daddy was the one that I could just jump in his arms, I couldn't do that with her. And at times I wished I could just get a hug from her and just lay in her arms, but that was something that she didn't have in her life. And she had to grow up at a young age, because she was sent to Brigham City boarding school, and she was like 14 years old. So she was away, and she didn't choose to go back home, because she's like, I'll just end up herding sheep. I'll stay and get a job here. So she was on her own from a young age, and I think that's a lot of why I didn't see her as the loving mom I could just go and tell anything to. It was like I felt like I was judged, and that I needed to live up to her standards. So what really turned my world around was my dad was I was older, and I actually met the man I was going to marry, and he was we found that my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and it was terminal. And from there on, my world was turned upside down. And from there on, I guess you could say the rug was pulled from under me, because he was definitely my go-to person, and just someone I trusted, and someone I thought was going to walk me down the aisle and would be there forever for me. And I definitely put him on a pedestal, and I relied on him. So when I learned that he was not going to be with us anymore, I really lost my sense of confidence and my sense of safety and my sense of security with that. And that's actually the onset of the panic attacks, when I knew he was going to leave. And I recovered from that, and I ended up, after he passed away, a year later, I ended up marrying my husband. And from seeing a therapist now, she said, when you met your husband, you transferred that security to him that you were able to get from your father. And so I did. I realized that. And then when he started using pain pills, which was, I found out 6 months after our wedding that he was taking OxyContin. And he had originally had a knee surgery, and he should have been off of that. And he sought it outside. And from that point on, it was just wondering where he was at, wondering what he was doing. Living with a drug addict is very exhausting, financially, physically, mentally. And the rug was pulled out from under me again, and that's when the panic attacks started again.
I want to apologize for the interruption. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It really helps out the channel, and you'll never miss an episode. Thanks.
And I was really naive. I saw the pills, and he said, "Oh yeah, they're for my knee surgery." I'm like, "But it's 6 months out." He's like, "Yeah, I still take them though." And then I was like, "Oh no."
Did you believe him when he said that? That it's still from the surgery?
Well, he admitted, he's like, "I not supposed to be taking them, but I still am." And then he was a carpet layer, so he told me he had back pain and knee pain, which, I was like, okay, maybe that's it. But then when he just said pain pills, and I just thought, oh. And then when I really looked at the prescription, when he started not coming home and started not acting like the man I married, and I looked at the bottle and it said OxyContin, I actually went to the doctor that prescribed them, and he was a pain management doctor, and I went in to go see him, and this guy had his back. I'm sure he was paid by the companies to distribute the stuff, because I was like, you know what? My dad had cancer and he didn't even take OxyContin. And he's like, "Oh no, it's perfectly legal." And yeah, you don't understand. You don't live with pain. And I ended up writing a letter. I consulted a lawyer and said, my husband's going to die because of this. And the lawyer said, write him a note and tell him you're watching this, and then if anything happens, you're going to hold him liable. And so I did. I wrote that to the office, and he was cut off, and he was mad. But you can always just go to another doctor, and that's what happened.
Yeah, that's my experience with addiction too, is like it's so outside of your control. No matter how much you try to control the situation, it's really on the individual. And I've been back and forth with many people on this, like, oh no, like what you do like really matters, and you could actually help people. And I'm not saying people can't have an impact, but it's like it really has to be an individual's choice to turn their life around. No matter how hard you try to control the situation, I don't think it's possible.
And I didn't know this at the time, because I did make it my mission to bring back the man that I had first married. And it was glimpses. It's like, he'd go to rehab and he'd get a job, and then things would be going good for like 6 to 8 months or even a year, and suddenly the relapse. And then it's all downhill again. Job loss of people's trust, and just not home, out chasing pills, and then of course trouble with the law, and then mandatory, probation, and then you're good again, and things are good. So it's like this cycle.
How many years did that go on for?
Numerous years. In fact, we're separated, but we're in contact because we have a son together, and he's like, I'd say 7 months right now sober. And when I see him and we do connect, I really praise that, because I know it's not like a light switch. I know it's a disease, and I know it's a struggle. It will be a struggle for all his life.
So, like, how old were you guys when you guys got married?
Wow. It was back in 2000.
Okay, yeah.
2000. So we were married in 2000 in June 24th, 2000. And there were some good times. And like I said, the real man I married is very sweet and very attentive. And for our first anniversary, in fact, he took us back to where we got married, and he packed a lunch for us, a really nice lunch. And so he did just loving things like that. I mean, he would my son would be playing at the park, and he'd bring a bunch of popsicles and just hand them out to all the kids. And he's like a little kid himself. So yeah, that's the man I really adore. And the other person is very narcissistic and very, I would have to say, just selfish. And throughout the marriage, I know there's different types of abuse, but if anything, he abandoned us. He didn't yell, he didn't throw a temper tantrum, he just wasn't there. Like he was unavailable.
So you mentioned that he kind of became your security after your father passed. So how was that when he started abusing?
Oh yeah, I spiraled down. I didn't realize why, but like I said, I made it my mission, and I lost my soul. I lost myself. I lost my identity in the process of trying to save him. And this whole journey up until now has been trying to find myself again and trying to get that confidence and that security back. And it's a work. It's a lot of work. I mean, I you name it, I've read it. I mean, just Wayne Dyer, Byron Katie, Mel Robbins, Joel Osteen, just all these teachers. And I've listened to podcasts, Darius Barazenda, and just a lot of healers out there. And that's what's good is I did turn to more of like, I guess, quantum healers, and they were very helpful. I visited some quantum healers.
I'm not super familiar with that term. What does that mean?
Quantum healers, they are healers that you can meet like this, like we're on video right now, or even through the phone. And they do like prayers and just energy work through the phone. And I was skeptical. Yeah, okay, there's this lady named Mona. Can I tell the story?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, her name's Mona, and she's a quantum healer. And I'd been having stomach problems for about like 2 weeks. I think it was IBS, because I was all anxiety riddled. So I call her up, and of course she wants payment, so I pay her. And she said, I'm going to call you, like I think it was a week out. She's like, so I'll call you on a Saturday, and or it was Friday or Saturday, and we'll do your healing. So it was a Friday night, yeah, so it was Saturday. And I go to bed, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I feel so sick. Like I'm like it's from the core of you, and I'm like, I am so sick. And I felt achy, like I'd gotten run over by a truck. So then look at the clock, and it says 3 a.m. and I'm like, this is a horrible time to be sick, but it is what it is. So I get up. I'm not feeling well, and I go back to bed and I'm tossing and turning and I think I'm sweating, and then I wake up. I finally fall asleep and I wake up, and the quantum healer, I've forgotten about her, but she's like texts me and she says, I'm going to be calling at 1. And it was like 12:15. And it's weird because where I was at, I look around and there's all these crows, and I have a thing about crows that I write about. So I look around and there's crows, and I was like, this is weird because there's like 12 crows around me, and I'm like, oh well. So I go back home and she calls me and she said, you know, I'm so and so and I'm a quantum healer. We're just going to talk, and I just want you to know that I had called upon, I believe she said, Raphael, to help heal you at 3 a.m. in the morning. And I remember that's when I woke up, and I'm like, you know what? I woke up at 3 a.m. and I was so sick. And she said, when your angel healed, you're gonna feel like really bad for a while, like you've been run over by a truck, and then you'll feel better. And I remember as I was talking to her, I'm like, I already feel better. And she's like, yes, but stay hydrated. So, and then I was talking to her and I felt my arm started twitching right here. And I was like, and she's all, and before I could say anything, she's like, your dad is poking you in your arm. And I'm like, whoa. And my dad had passed away. And I said, so he's right here? And I can't see him. And she's like, yeah, he's sitting right beside you. And she said, he wants you to know that he worked himself to death, which makes great sense because he would work from, he'd get to work at 7, and then he was off like at 4, and then he had to go to his next job from 5 to like 9. He did that for many years. And so she said, he wants you to know that he worked himself to death. And that was like, whoa. And that resonated. But she's also said he wants you to know that he visits you and that he's okay. And so I'm like, oh great. And what was weird, another thing is, when we were on that phone call, she's like, I see a woman and a baby. And she's like, did you have a baby? Or, and I didn't even think of the time about my abortion. She goes, and did your mom pass away, or your grandmother? And I was thinking my adopted, who I consider my own real mom and my own real grandma, because they're all I know. And I'm like, no, my mom's still here, my grandmas are still here, so I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, okay, that's okay. I just want you to know she's in turquoise and white, and she has got her baby with her. So I didn't think anything of it. And then afterwards, later on, I was like thinking, whoa, because she's not the first one that's told me that. I was on another phone call with Wealth with Darius Barazunda, and he had a psychic there, and she said, there's a woman there, a Navajo woman, and she wants you to know that she's never going to leave you, and that she's taking care of your unborn baby. And I'm like, oh my God. And that's when it kind of dawned. And then I still had the skeptic in me until, and this is the ending of my book, and you guys are supposed to read it, but I'll tell you what happens. One portion of the book is, I have this neighbor who said he could read auras, and I believe him, and he was a psychic channeler, and his name was Bob Clements. And before he passed, and right when I was about to end my book, and I'm like, I can't think of an ending, my mom is like, can you take this soup to Bob and his wife? So I go over there, and I have this big bowl of soup, and I walk over there, and he's like, come in. And I've never asked him to read me because I've been told by his daughter he's really weak, and when he reads people, it takes it out of him. But this one day, I come in with the soup, I set it down, and he's staring like into my soul, and I look at him, and he's got these bright blue eyes, and elderly gentleman, sweetest man. And I could tell he's looking around me, and I'm like, oh wow, he's reading me. He's never done this, and I've known him for like since I was a baby. And he looked at me and he says, Rochelle. Well, I'm Shell, but my real name is Rochelle, but everyone calls me Shell. And he said, Rochelle, your aura, I could see your aura, and he told me it was violet. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then he said, there's a Navajo woman all in white, and she's motioning like this, that she's gonna stay put, and that I get the sense she's fiercely protective of you. She's always with you, and she wants you to fight. And then he said, and she wants you to know that she has a baby boy. So that was confirmation of I believe that was either my grandmother, my biological grandmother, or my biological mom. And she's passed, but she's there watching over me and my unborn child.
Wow, I have so many like chills after that.
And from that moment on, I felt like a healing. And I thought, I got this. There's something more, something greater out there. And I have to keep forging on, and I've got this. It was like my piece to the puzzle that had been missing.
So, when you started talking about quantum healers, I was kind of thinking it was going to be more about like chakras or something like that, but then they started talking about angels, and so is it more like Catholic-based healers or Christian-based healers? Or
I don't know what religion this particular, I hope she doesn't mind me saying her name, but her name is Mona Delfino, and I found her on Facebook. But she's more into, alignment, chakras, but what she used on me was, she said angel healing. So I'm sure there's different things, that Reiki and a lot of things, and I believe if you put your energy and your belief into something, whatever it is, it can manifest, and you can get good at it.
Like going through that process with your husband and stuff turned like fed into your anxiety. Like was the panic attacks and overwhelming anxiety already happening previous to your husband, like, basically falling off? Or
it started with my dad. That was my first panic attack. But and then I was like, oh, I just got nervous, and I didn't know, pretty naive, that could be something going forward that I would have to deal with. And then finding my husband on the floor in the garage, that's in the book. I found him face down, and I thought he had passed away, and he was still alive. And he was missing overnight, and I happened to find the address in his pocket and went to the address in the morning. And I found the address that morning, and then I went straight there, and it was a big mansion, and I couldn't see him. I could see his truck outside, but I couldn't find him inside the house. I looked everywhere. The doors were open, and I looked outside, and finally I'm like, oh, there's a door to the garage. So I went into the garage, and the light was on in there, and he was laying face down, and I thought, oh, this is it. And I just started begging in my mind, please don't take him, because I'd wanted my son to grow up with a dad. Even if he was addicted, I wanted him to have a father figure. And I rolled him around and propped him up, and I actually went to the drive-thru. I didn't call 911 because he had a warrant. He had told me previously, I have a warrant. If they take me, I'm just going to do something to myself in there. So I thought about that, and I'm like, if I call the ambulance, they're going to take him in, and he's going to possibly harm himself. So I went down to a fast food place at the bottom of this neighborhood, and when I was in the fast food waiting to get some water and just something to drink and something to eat, like my heart started racing, and it was like panic, and I was like full-blown panic attack trying to get my food, and I made it through, and by then you're dizzy and disoriented, but I had to go back, and I did, and he was sitting up, and the first thing he asked me, and I had searched his pockets, and I found Xanax and pain pills together, which is a horrible combination, and I'd thrown them away at the bottom of the hill because it was garbage day, and I threw those pills away. I was so mad. And then when I came back and he was sitting up, I had some drink and some food, and he looked sweaty, but he looked okay. And the first thing he asked me was, "Did you take my pills?" And I lied. I said no, but I had taken them. And then he spent the next half of the day, which was 4 hours or 5 hours or even more, looking for where they could have been lost. And I knew we've got a big problem. A problem with him because he's addicted, a problem with me because now I'm having extreme panic attacks. And it just got worse. I mean, even and I in 2010 I had a car accident where I had a brain bleed in my head, and that exasperated it also because I didn't feel like myself for about 2 years, and it just felt like someone hit you over the head with a bat. And yeah, that's when I really did not leave the house. In fact, I lived on social media. That was my only interaction with people, was through Twitter. And I met a group of people, and they're great girls. And I really got into racing. I was into watching NASCAR because, this is funny, NASCAR and IndyCar, because I thought those people were brave. And I'm like, how can they get in a car and wreck and then go back in the car the next day? I get into this car wreck, and it takes me out for like my whole life. It doesn't make sense. But then I realize now they have protective gear and they're getting paid millions, so there's quite a bit of difference.
I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. If you are interested in being on the podcast, please email cartherapypod@gmail.com. Thank you.